Tuesday, Chinese President Xi Jinping pledged to make unremitting efforts toward promoting peace in the Middle East after a meeting with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. Palestinian officials had urged China, which supports an independent Palestinian state, to increase efforts to advance the Middle East peace process. Despite its reliance on the region for oil, China has traditionally played little role in the Middle East conflicts or diplomacy. After receiving a Palestinian Medal of Honor from Abbas, Xi said, "As the Palestinian people's good friend, partner, and brother, China hopes Palestine and Israel can achieve peace as soon as possible and live and work in peace. China will make unremitting efforts for this."
The Palestinian government appears to have added a new precondition for negotiations with Israel, demanding that Israel publicly commit to a two-state solution. The Palestinians had previously demanded a complete freeze in settlement construction and the release of security prisoners from Israeli jails before they would return to the negotiating table. But now Palestinian Foreign Minister Riyad al-Maliki told Chinese news agency Xinhua that Israel must declare its commitment to the two-state solution in addition to ending settlement activity for negotiations to resume. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has declared his support for a demilitarized Palestinian state that would recognize Israel as a Jewish state, but members of his right-wing coalition remain opposed. This comes as Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas lands in Beijing for a three-day visit.
Tensions are high in Jerusalem following Friday's terror attack on the Temple Mount and the installations of new security measures around the entrances to the holy site. Israel has placed metal detectors at the Muslim-only entrances to the site of the First and Second Temples, as well as the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. But the move is being violently protested by the Jordanian Islamic Waqf and its followers, who have clashed with security forces. Now, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas's Fatah party has called for a day of rage on Wednesday in protest. They want their followers to march towards Israeli checkpoints in the West Bank, and they're saying that Friday's prayer will be held in public squares. With this plan in mind, it seems the likelihood of violence is high. In 2015, Abbas's rhetoric about filthy Zionist feet desecrating Al-Aqsa helped kick off the stabbing intifada, and other Palestinian allegations about damage to the Islamic site have led to riots and violence in the past.
On the Israeli settlement in the occupied West Bank, groups of tourists are trained inside a simulated fruit market to recognize whether an Arab man holding a cell phone is a threat or not. This mock scenario is aimed to teach foreign visitors how to deal with a terrorist if it were to happen inside a market. This part of a counterterrorism boot camp that was created by Caliber 3, a company that was set up by a colonel in the Israeli Army Reserves.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has told Christian evangelicals that they are Israel's best friends in the world. Speaking via video to the annual conference of Christians United for Israel, Netanyahu said Israel and the US are engaged in a struggle of civilizations against the forces of militant Islam. He argued militant Islamists hate the West, including Israel, because they represent free societies built on Judeo-Christian heritage.
Speaking at a CUFI conference, Vice President Mike Pence has just reiterated President Trump's campaign promises to move the American embassy to Jerusalem. Quote, "To the men and women of Christians United for Israel, the president hears you. This president stands with you, and I promise you that the day will come when President Donald Trump moves the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. It's not a question of if, it's only when."
Donald Trump threatening Venezuela with sanctions on Monday, promising to take, quote, strong and swift economic actions if the country creates a constituent assembly. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro is pushing for the plan to go ahead in a vote at the end of the month. It would give the power to rewrite the constitution. However, Trump says the US won't stand by as Venezuela crumbles. On Sunday, 98% of opposition supporters voted unofficially to reject the proposed assembly. Venezuelans also strongly back a call to hold elections before Maduro's term ends in 2019. The South American country has already faced months of anti-government riots, which have killed some 100 people. Maduro insists opposition leaders are US pawns, intent on sabotaging the economy and bringing him down through violence. If American sanctions were imposed, they would likely be on Venezuela's vital energy sector. White House officials told Reuters last month the administration is moving cautiously, mindful of moves which could deepen the country's economic and social crisis.
A senior commander in Iran's Revolutionary Guards warned the United States on Monday that if it designated the group as a terrorist organization and applied new sanctions, the actions could be perilous for U.S. forces in the region. U.S. officials said earlier this year that President Donald Trump's administration was considering a proposal that could lead to categorizing the powerful Revolutionary Guards as a terrorist organization. In June, the U.S. Senate voted for new sanctions on Iran over its ballistic missile program.
Well, 2 Iranians have reportedly been indicted in the United States in connection with the hacking of a defense contractor and stealing sensitive software used to design bullets and warheads. The U.S. Justice Department says they broke into the computers of Vermont-based Aerotech Associates, and the materials stolen are sold to Iranian universities, the military, and the government. U.S. sanctions on Iran prohibit the country from possessing such materials.
Qatar and the United Arab Emirates are locked in a fresh diplomatic tussle, this time over hacking and fake news. The trouble started when Qatar's state-run news agency published a false article back in May, claiming the country's leader had praised Iran and Hamas. The fake report helped drive a diplomatic wedge between Qatar and its neighbors. The news agency later said the article was posted due to a site hack, which a new report blames on the UAE. According to the Washington Post, senior UAE officials discussed planting the article in Qatari media. The Post notes the UAE might have employed a third party, which could explain previous reports that Russia was behind the hack. Qatar has jumped on the Post report, accusing the UAE of violating international law. For its part, the UAE has denied having anything to do with the attack. The fresh fiasco complicates U.S. efforts to smooth over the crisis. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson spent part of last week in the region trying to resolve the dispute.
Cyber attacks have the potential to be as costly to the global economy as some natural disasters, according to the world's oldest insurance marketplace. Lloyd's of London found that cyber attacks on cloud services like Google Cloud Platform could cost as much as $120 billion in damage. That means, at its worst, an attack could far exceed the cost of Hurricane Katrina. Lloyd's also looked at a scenario similar to last month's WannaCry ransomware attack. At its most extreme, Lloyd's said a similar attack could cost nearly $29 billion. Insuring against cybercrimes is fairly new, and Lloyd's warns that most of the losses from these types of cyber attacks would not be covered.
The FBI is warning parents about the privacy and safety risks from children's toys connected to the internet. In an advisory posted on its website, the Federal Bureau of Investigation said that such toys may contain microphones, cameras, GPS, data storage, and speech recognition that may disclose personal information. In February, Germany banned sales and ownership of a talking doll named Kayla, made by US company Genesis Toys, after concerns about possible hacking arose. According to Reuters, the FBI said normal conversation with the toy or in the surrounding environment may disclose a child's name, school, likes and dislikes, and activities.
A serious security flaw on MySpace may have left user accounts and details critically vulnerable. Security researcher Leanne Galloway first spotted the flaw, posted to her blog how that with no more than a user's full name, email address, and date of birth, all quite readily available if you know where to look, a hacker could easily take control of a MySpace account. The ease with which your page could have been hacked means that MySpace learned little after its major hack of 2016, in which 360 million accounts were thought to be breached. Galloway said, "It seems MySpace wants us all to take security into our own hands. If there is a possibility that you still have an account on MySpace, I recommend you delete your account immediately."
Britain's most famous cuddly bear has become something of an outlaw in China. Whilst it's still possible to display images of Winnie the Pooh on social media, any comments have been blocked. It began in 2013 when pictures of Winnie and his friend Tigger were superimposed on images of President Xi Jinping and former US President Barack Obama. But with the Chinese Communist Party's 5-year Congress approaching and President Xi Jinping expected to win a new term as head of the country, the Beijing censors are being very vigilant in protecting his image.
He vowed martial law would be harsh, and now Rodrigo Duterte wants it to stay. The Philippine president asking for an extension on Tuesday, stretching military rule over all of the southern island of Mindanao until the year's end. It would give his government more time and freedom to crush a rebel movement inspired by Islamic State and take back Marawi City. It's a crisis that so far killed more than 500 people and displaced at least 260,000. Duterte says an extension will allow his forces to continue the fight unhampered by deadlines, while focusing on the liberation of Marawi and its rehabilitation. But it's sure to hit a nerve in a country where martial law is a sensitive issue going back decades. The bold militant takeover of Marawi has been the biggest crisis of Duterte's one-year presidency, fanning fears extremists in the country's south have radicalised and recruited far more than officials first thought.
Violence erupted in Turkey's Kurdish-dominated southeast following the decision to extend a government-backed state of emergency. Police were seen attacking union members who were complaining against the massive sackings of public workers already carried out as part of a crackdown under emergency rule. Earlier, Turkey's parliament, where President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's AK party has a comfortable majority, it extended the state of emergency for a fourth time. It's now been in effect since last year's failed coup. The move has been given a mixed reception. Some see it as a necessary measure. Pro-government lawmaker Bulut Turan says, "We do not want to live in emergency rule, we're not looking for it. However, we're facing a problem, and to overcome it on behalf of our nation and to guarantee our future in the framework of law, we think that the emergency rule has to continue." Opposition lawmaker Aytu Atuce is more critical. He says President Erdogan shielded himself with the emergency rule. He turned a coup attempt of a political terror group into a positive chance for him, and he's using the emergency rule as a dictator regime. That's why we think that the emergency rule needs to be lifted.
Tension is high in Afrin, the biggest city under the control of Kurdish fighters in northern Syria. Kurdish militiamen say Turkish forces and Syrian rebels allied to them have been shelling Afrin and its suburbs for weeks. The Kurdish fighters say Turkish military deployments in areas under their control amount to a declaration of war.
Turkish forces and their allies have been shelling out positions. We are ready to defend Afrin and all areas under our control.
People who live in Afrin have protested against what they call Turkish aggression.
The protests are a clear message to the world that our people are ready with their weapons to defend our city from any threats.
With American weapons, air cover and training, Syrian Kurds have died fighting against ISIL. They've taken pride in their status as the United States' most faithful proxy in the fight against ISIL. They say their aim is to establish an autonomous region in Syria and not their own state, where their rights are protected. To accomplish that, though, they need to connect two of their territories, Afrin in the west and Al-Kamishli in the east. That is something Turkey sees as a national security threat and to be fought at any cost.
The diplomatic dispute between Germany and Turkey has now got NATO involved. Our correspondent in Berlin, Paula Slee, has got more for you.
Well, at this stage, it seems difficult that the two countries will be able to heal the divide without the involvement of NATO. And certainly NATO has become involved ever since the Turkish authorities refused permission to a German parliamentarian delegation wanting to visit German troops who are currently based at a NATO Air Force base in the southwest of the country in the town of Konya. Now, this is the second time that German lawmakers have been refused permission to a base, and it has resulted in the past in some German troops being moved to a base inside Jordan. Now, the German Chancellor Angela Merkel has said that she expects NATO to help ease tensions.
Undoubtedly, not only the German government will speak with Turkey, but NATO as well.
In the sometimes hostile waters of the Persian Gulf looms the U.S. Navy's first, in fact, the world's first, active laser weapon. The LAWS, an acronym for Laser Weapons System, is not science fiction, it is not experimental. It is deployed on board the USS Ponce amphibious transport ship, ready to be fired at targets today and every day by Captain Christopher Wells and his crew. CNN was granted exclusive access to a live-fire test of the laser.
Operationally, it works just like a laser pointer. There's a chamber inside with special materials that release photons.
If you're looking at a boat coming in over the water, you can target exactly the engine and take out exactly the engine and not necessarily damage anything else. So, and that type of precision weapon work is something that you don't really get with conventional weapons because there tends to be more collateral damage.
It's useful against a variety of threats, surface or air. It's not a niche weapon system like some other weapons that we have, throughout the military, where it's only good against air contacts or it's only good against surface targets.
In a rare move, South Korean President Moon Jae-in wants to hold military talks with the North to ease tensions and hopefully reach a peace deal. The South is proposing a mutual end to hostile acts at the country's border on July 27th, the 64th anniversary of the end of the Korean War. The 3-year conflict ended with a ceasefire, not a peace treaty. North Korea's conducted at least 11 missile tests this year, including an intercontinental ballistic missile. Moon spoke earlier this month in Berlin and said the only way to get the North to denuclearize is if both sides reduce military tensions first. A local outlet reports the two countries haven't had military talks like this since 2014. Those failed after the North demanded the South stop activists from spreading anti-regime pamphlets and prevent media from publishing critical stories. South Korean media expects the North to accept the invitation, but the North will likely demand the U.S. and South Korea stop the joint military drills, a request both sides have rejected before.
Japanese Coast Guard says 2 Chinese patrol ships briefly entered Japanese waters on Monday morning off Aomori Prefecture, a first for the area. After a warning, they left about 90 minutes later, but were spotted again off Kape Tapi about 2 hours later and stayed there for another 3.5 hours. Also Monday, 4 Chinese Coast Guard ships entered Japanese territorial waters around the Senkaku Islands, which is administered by Tokyo but claimed by China and Taiwan. The move follows the entry of 2 Chinese Coast Guard ships on Saturday around 2 islands off Kyushu, which was also a first in that region.
Shop owners in central Athens are clearing up after around 100 protesters marched through the area throwing rocks and smashing windows. The protest followed a court's rejection of an appeal by a 29-year-old student against her conviction of belonging to a radical anarchist group. This shop worker says, "We heard a group of protesters, suddenly we heard bang, 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 we ran out of the shop and saw that everything was broken."
I see the group now, around 6-5 groups, it was coming to break everything. So sadly, I saw them and we couldn't do anything.
Members of the conspiracy of fire cells are linked to a wave of letter bombings. The student at the centre of the protest denies membership and says her conviction was based on her association with another suspect who was later cleared.
We begin today in Chicago, Illinois. With every week that passes, the death toll seems to rise. Over the weekend, 56 people were shot and 11 were fatally wounded, including a city activist and a minor. Chicago police and federal authorities are working together to crack down on the violence. Just last month, the Department of Justice announced the city would participate in a program called Crime Gun Strike Force in order to remove illegal guns and repeat gun offenders from the city streets.
When we hear the term ceasefire, we usually think of conflict zones in the Middle East, don't we? But people in one US city, Baltimore, it's only 50 kilometres from the capital, are calling right now for a truce. Why? Well, they're sickened by the skyrocketing level of gun violence in their city.
Baltimore currently is a war zone.
This is a war-torn city. Most people between the age of 1 to 7 definitely have PTSD, which is, of course, from the shootings, from the teddy bears on the wall, from people getting shot in broad daylight before your eyes, walking over glass, walking over bodies and things like that. Ceasefire going to stand because if I don't shoot my gun, that's one person. Well, this ceasefire is planned to begin anyway on the 4th of August so that the organisers have got time to spread the message first. During the truce, residents are encouraged to focus on positive community-related activities instead.
Moving on now, a number of mayors in Italy are taking action over the latest influx of migrants, saying the country's being overwhelmed. Just last week, another 8,000 refugees arrived ashore. The mayor of a small town in Sicily launched his protest after receiving a call warning him that 50 migrants were to be accommodated in an old hotel nearby.
I'm upset because I'm the mayor of this town, and the government literally went over our heads. I was alerted by the prefecture at around 10 o'clock in the evening when they told me some migrants were arriving. I told them, okay, I'm here, let me check. I arrived and the migrants were already here. The government had it all organized since the morning.
Well, after discovering the decision to accommodate the migrants was already made, he rallied locals on Facebook to blockade the hotel with their vehicles. They even managed to cut the power to the property, leaving the migrants in darkness. Speaking to reporters, the mayor directed his fury squarely at the government over its handling of Italy's latest migrant crisis.
We have been invaded, overrun and overwhelmed by the migrant management system of these cooperatives, which know nothing about our communities.
According to a State Department memo, grandparents of U.S. citizens from 6 Muslim-majority countries are now eligible to receive U.S. visas. The memo from U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson was sent to all U.S. diplomatic posts overseas on Friday. The memo comes after a U.S. district judge in Hawaii issued a ruling on Thursday to limit the scope of the administration's temporary ban on refugees and travelers from the 6 countries. A U.S. district in Honolulu found that the government cannot bar grandparents and other relatives of United States citizens from Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen from getting visas under the ban. The cable has since been reversed by the State Department, making them eligible for visas.
In Hawaii, pro-life pregnancy centers are now being forced to tell their patients about free abortions provided by the state. A new law is now requiring a sign go up that says Hawaii has public programs that provide immediate free or low-cost access to comprehensive family planning services, including but not limited to all FDA-approved methods of contraception and pregnancy-related services for eligible women.
Well, for all of our lives, we've lived in a world of boys and girls, but that is changing along with everything else in 2017. In Canada, the country directly to our north, the parent of a baby successfully petitioned to have that child given an ID card with no sex listed, insisting that that is for the baby to decide. Things may not stop there. They probably won't. The Gender Free ID Coalition is calling on the Canadian government to eliminate sex and gender classifications for all children throughout that country. Are we ready for a world here where baby boys and girls are replaced by baby somethings?
Finally tonight here, America Strong, the retriever whose family tells us he never retrieves anything. But he did this weekend. Here's ABC's Gio Benitez.
Storm is trying to save this baby deer.
That's Storm, the golden retriever, in the middle of the water there, about to save a life.
Storm, bring him in! Good boy, Storm, bring him in!
Storm's owner says the dog spotted something in New York's Long Island Sound yesterday morning and jumped in.
Storm is saving this baby deer right this minute.
Getting hold of a drowning baby deer and bringing it to shore. The video capturing as many hearts as Facebook views, more than 1.8 million so far. Storm's owner, Mark Freely, telling us Storm won't even retrieve a tennis ball. But that day, he knew what he had to do.
Good boy, Storm, okay?
Watch how Storm nudges her, making sure the fawn is okay.
Good job, boy. She's okay.
Okay tonight, all because of her new best friend.